name is Dr. Michelle Lynch, and I'm the Consulting Director for Enable Future Limited, which is a company I set up last year. And the idea of the company is to work with the chemicals and materials manufacturers and to bring them forward into the 21st century environment, which involves several big changes for them. Chemical companies are pretty conservative, they're not really used to changing fast. Many of them haven't really still reacted sufficiently to shifting geographical patterns. So China, for instance, having a larger share of the market. And so things like automation, Industry 4.0, push for more renewable chemicals, and move towards advanced manufacturing with rapid deployment of technology are things that they're having to deal with all at once, as well as cybersecurity and lots of other things. So the idea of what I do is to try and guide companies and startups through that environment, providing consulting, market reports, training, and offering a kind of a brokering service between startups and investors.
Thank you very much. So, I'm sorry, your name was?
Michelle.
Michelle, fantastic. So this is, the first question is totally unfair on you because the others were warned about this earlier, but I think we've met everyone as far as their work titles, but it's quite nice to get a little beyond that and just find out who you are as people, first of all. And I think the best way is to find out what really excites you. So the first question to each of our panelists is really just what's the coolest thing you've seen this year? The rule is it can't be your children, and it's preferably outside of the Internet of Things.
Thanks to me first. Okay, I was hoping for some inspiration from the others. Cool thing, I mean, there's so much happening in the world. What was the coolest thing that I've seen this year? Do you know, I don't know if this is cool, but it really struck me as intriguing, which was recently there was $30 million worth of Ethereum that was stolen. And I read a number of articles on it, and the general conclusion was, so what? And I tend to think that $31 million is a reasonably large sum of money, and that some people will be bothered. But it doesn't seem to matter, which for me was absolutely incredible. That was pretty cool. Robert.
I guess we're just moving down the line. So mine is completely unrelated to that, and it's related to cats. Not my cats or children or anything like that. And it is actually, I'm going to break the rule, it is kind of IoT related. It's like the IoT of cats. But one of the cool things that I know is I got a friend of mine who is an avid cat owner and also a tech journalist. So she, of course, has combined the technology of the cat piece, and she has a tweeting cat flap. Not only is the cat flap tweet every time the cat goes in and out of the house, it also takes a picture of the cat. Of course, you get a certain end depending when it's coming or going, which is quite interesting. But the coolest part about it is another friend that does a lot of software has actually written some Python scripts and some software around it. So every time the cat goes in and out, it actually puts together a little phrase greeting the cat or saluting the cat as it leaves, and does all sorts of things with occasional seasonal updates as well. So if you don't believe me, or if you do want to follow this cat flap on Twitter, her cat's name is Daphne, and the Twitter handle is Daphne Flap. And please, I encourage you to check it out. I think it's currently over 1,400 followers, and I told my friend Kate that maybe we could get her over 1,500 followers on her cat flap tonight. So there you go, that's a cool thing for me.
Excellent.
Yeah, so for me it was Elon Musk's AI company that built that pro gamer in a game of, does anyone remember the name of the game? Yeah. It was just this week, wasn't it? That was I think, and you know, the comment that Elon Musk actually released following that was that we have so much to consider about AI and the risks that come with it. And I think fascinating.
Great. Michelle.
So much to choose from. I've seen lots of cool things, including a robot that can sing and act. That was pretty special. And the Pink Floyd exhibition that's on at the V&A at the moment, the interactive things, that is extremely cool. That is probably the coolest thing I've seen this year. But on to something maybe slightly more important from a medical point of view, 3D printing of medical devices and scaffolds for things like heart and body part transplants. So actually being able to improve patient care and operations using 3D printing is very cool. And at one point in the future, after lots of development, we'll be able to perhaps DNA match and actually print human tissue and organs to do that an even easier process and improve quality of life.
Cool. Hang on to the mic because I think this one is working. That I think leads us on quite nicely. So we've come together here to hear from you, our experts tonight. But what I think we're trying to give to people in the audience is the takeaways that they can go and follow up on. So I'm interested in what you have as in terms of sources and where you look for experts. So this could be in terms of case studies, particular businesses or people or news sources. Perhaps we start at the end again, and if you just want to share perhaps any sources that you think are really helpful in finding out the boundaries of what's going on around the Internet of Things.
I read a lot of online blogs. To be honest, I'm not choosy. I will read anything, and what I'm looking for is blogs that have sound data behind them, that are logically laid out. And so I just use Medium, and I think through the selections that I've made when I became a member of Medium, I get the things that are interesting, so I get regular, read this about Internet of Things. And I find that the brilliant thing is you never know what you're going to be reading. It could be written by anyone. And I really love the fact in the modern age that anyone can write, anyone can be a journalist, anyone can research, can find the information and write something that can really have value and be helpful. So really the answer to your question is all of you. Any of you that want to go online and blog and do it well and research, I will read.
So Medium, any other?
Not really. I don't like to seek. I like people to bring good blog articles to me. So in Motion we have a team of some 30 people who are always reading blogs, and we have a Slack channel where we share them. And I think having things that are recommended for you is a really efficient way to find useful information. There's a lot out there that isn't so useful, but basing on recommendation is a good way to do it.
Cool, thanks.
Great, so yeah, lots of sources on the internet. I'll talk about some of the non-internet ones. I think I touched on a couple earlier as far as industry associations. Industrial Internet Consortium is quite a good one. Some of the partners we work with also work with an organization called EdgeX Foundry, which does a lot about IoT and industrial IoT and the edge networks. But I guess if you really want to look at, and my focus is more on the industrial IoT side, I find that a lot of the information and useful things that are happening sometimes are with a lot of the companies that are closest to the edge devices. So if you're doing things that actually have sensors, you're doing things that are actual gateways, I find some of the stuff in the core of the network can be a bit esoteric sometimes. So if you want to look at suppliers and technology providers that have ruggedized industrial gateways that actually sit in cars and sit in factories, these are the guys that actually have to deal with the day-to-day things about, it's polluted, it's hot, it's, needs to connect to something. Those are the guys that have some of the real things, and I would say look at those sort of providers of technology. And actually, again, in the industrial space, again, maybe a bit old school about this, but the guys that used to be the M2M guys and are now IoT, because IoT is the cool word now. But some of the guys that have been shipping 50,000 SIM cards a month for the last 10 years, getting into this space, they know the space really well, and there's a lot of things you can learn from some of those people and what they're doing.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I think I would follow on from that and say that some of the best sources would be people, as opposed maybe to all the things you see written. And I just get thousands of articles and different information sources on IoT every week. But I prefer to have a spread of contacts, so I have a professor at Nottingham University, contacts in Honeywell, GE and Siemens, and people investing in the area. So for instance, venture capitalists who are investing in these areas, generally people who have the biggest purses, people who are spending the most money on something, usually have the best idea what's going on. So that's
Who's
what I
spending the
recommend.
most money?
in industrial IoT, I would say Honeywell UAP is probably one of the biggest leaders in that sector, GE and Siemens. I can't speak necessarily for consumer sectors, but academia is also underlooked now. They have very big budgets in some of the universities, millions and millions of pounds, perhaps bigger budgets than some small to medium-sized companies. So getting in touch with a few very good thought leaders in academia is also a really good idea.
So some of the, I think, most cherished ideas that we've picked up have actually come out of conversations with people that have heard about Hexology and have come to us and said, we're really interested in doing this. In fact, they come to tell me how they would want to use Hexology, and that's just like, comes out of the blue. Personally, I have some favourite influencer bloggers that I follow, and you know, and when they pop up on Twitter, I often read what they're doing, and they come from sources that, you know, Medium, for example, there's some great stuff around there. But you know, science fiction is probably a really powerful influence over me.
Any particular authors?
Well, you know, I mentioned AI earlier, and I don't know if anyone saw the movie Ex Machina, but that was, for me, just like rocking it.
Nice. Let's get this in. Perhaps I think we were going to check in on the impact that IoT is having. So it'd be nice if we could do a rundown of the panel and think about the winners and losers through the development and further expansion of IoT?
So I think that it's basically down from my point of view, it's just about the user experience. You know, Hexology is putting the power of technology into people's hands, and whoever produces the most frictionless, useful, well thought out user experience is going to come out on top.
Cool, thanks very much. Cool, so we're on winners and losers. Over to you, Michelle.
I would say the winners are people who are armed with the right information at the start. You can spend a lot of money on IoT. I think associated enablers like cybersecurity. So people that will win are people that are properly briefed and implement it correctly. People that lose will be people that don't implement it correctly and end up with something that has less value in use than they might have expected because they haven't done their market research. People who don't protect it securely. So we've seen major cyber breaches on IoT devices. So it can cause a big loss in reputation. So from my point of view as a consultant, I would say people have to do their due diligence up front before they invest in something like IoT.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think there's, well, and we could talk for days about both of those categories, I think. Some of the big winners in the space that I deal with, there's a lot of integrators out there. We talk about all the disparate networks, all the different things that need to be stitched together, the evolution from old technology and new technology. That's a pretty tough piece. So integrating those, there's a lot of people making a lot of money and doing a very good job of some of the integration piece. There's a lot of people that are doing not as good a job in the integration piece, but I think in the industrial side, there's definitely a lot of benefit there. And I think a lot of these, the utilities and industrial side, they're getting a lot of benefits in their operational costs, efficiency, how they're doing things, and they're starting to see that now. So I think there's a lot of winners on that side. There's obviously a lot of cool things happening in the home, but I do think massive security gaps in home pieces. It's just getting stuff out there and saying, well, you know, let's connect it first, let's worry about security later in the home. And actually, a lot of that is becoming a wider issue because it actually used to be consumer stuff in the home. People don't really care that much about security, but you look at things like the FBI getting involved in the US about, you know, trying to get consumer security right. I personally don't think they're really worried about consumers. What they're worried about is people turning consumer devices into malicious botnets that then attack the enterprise. So there's a lot of things that are happening on that. A lot of security leaks. I think, you know, one of the big IoT in the home things was a company called Ring that has the internet-enabled doorbell. I think they fixed this, but I think they had something where you could peel it off the wall, press the red button on the back, and you've got the encryption keys for the Wi-Fi network for that home, right? Not what you want. And finally, I think probably the biggest losers in all this are those that paid $1,000 for that washing machine. Right?
Yeah, I think I'd like to split it clearly between industrial IoT and consumer IoT. And I think on the consumer side, I think this is a tough place to be, because if you're developing technology for consumers and IoT at the moment, you really need to have that killer use case, the thing that makes people want to have. And I've personally been surprised by the success of Amazon Echo, because I personally haven't seen myself a killer use that would make me buy one, but a lot of people have them in their homes now. I have Sonos, and for me Sonos is great because I can stream music, and maybe that's why people are buying Amazon Echo, because they can listen to music with the speaker isn't so good. It's maybe not for me. The point is that manufacturers of devices in that consumer space need to really think about what the right service is that people want, and the company that finds that right package will be the winner. And it may not necessarily be one of the people who already have IoT devices in their homes right now, but it's going to be tough, and it's going to be a long drawn out battle to see where that goes. On industrial IoT, I've spoken to a few companies that are doing fantastically well, selling Internet of Things technologies and platforms into big businesses. And I think there are, in the very short term, going to be some big winners in that area. I think, I won't name companies, but I think that if we're looking for short-term wins on IoT, it will be on the industrial side, where companies can have a really big benefit from connecting their devices, predictive maintenance. And the consumer side will catch up. One final point, which is vehicles. They're nowhere to be seen in the world of Internet of Things at the moment, really. And manufacturers, if they want vehicles to be part of the ecosystem, there's a lot of work to do to catch up. For me, if they don't put some serious work in now, working out what it is that consumers can get from having a connected vehicle, then they will be losers.
Cool, thanks. So please do get your questions ready, because time for the last question from me. Probably my favourite. I'm interested in what the best arguments are that you've had about the Internet of Things. So it's a subject that creates great debate, and perhaps you could just bring to life any great debate you've had recently on this subject.
I'm not sure I can bring it to life, but
the more traumatic, the better.
by the way, I've had some non-Internet of Things arguments, but I'll stick to an Internet of Things one. I have a lot of conversations with people about actually Amazon Echo and similar products, there's a real strong feeling among some that this is a really powerful product, and I think my argument is based on the fact that I think the people who are buying now have them in their homes and maybe don't use them. I guess that might be the case, and by the way, the reason this question is asked because it might promote some questions from you guys. You might have an opinion that disagrees with me, but my assumption is a lot of people have Amazon Echo and aren't using it. And this is a debate that I have from time to time with people. I think people get excited about tech sometimes without thinking about what they're using the tech for. And sometimes the argument that we have is about putting the tech first, putting the service first, and working out what the right tech is to solve the solution. But that's my one for questions for further discussion.
Yeah, that's great. Does anyone happen to have any stats on Echo usage? We could just see this argument off here and now.
No one's using it.
Think you won. Cool, Robert.
Yeah, so I guess I would agree, quite wholeheartedly with the Amazon example. And there's a lot of technology that's chasing a use case, right? I think the washing machine was a great example as well. What's the problem that you're trying to solve has always been a thing that I ask when I talk to people. The other part that I have some interesting debates about. I mean, I talked to a lot of people about some security stuff. So obviously the blockchain piece, which is something I brought up today because I have a lot of discussions with people about that. I think that highlights that sometimes when we all start talking about IoT, we start talking about a lot of this really interesting stuff. we do start getting into the future piece of 2, 3, 4 steps out, which is great to talk about, but there's a lot of really, maybe less exciting problems, but really hardcore problems today to solve that I think are being ignored, sometimes stepped over. Don't quote me on this because I think I might have got this wrong, but I think someone told me the day that I think Amber Rudd was quoted as, "Oh, encryption's not relevant for connected things." I'm like, I disagree with that. So I do think there's a lot of here and now problems, a lot of here and now issues, both consumer and industrial, and I think sometimes people are stepping a couple of steps ahead of the need for the technology and stepping over some of the here and now problems to the IoT today.
Cool. Thank you, Michelle. Any good debates recently?
Probably the best example of using connected data in an industrial setting is in fermentation. So my professor friend at Nottingham is helping a company to make beer using weather data. So when the weather data comes in and says it's going to be warmer, they have to change lots of things in the plant, they have to switch valves and kinds of differently. So it helps them to plan for that, and when it's cold, they get the opposite. So we're all obviously quite fond of, the person was quite fond of drinking beer.
That's an answer to the same question.
Yeah, well, there you go. And so steering away from all the kind of maybe less glamorous things about security and money and all that, yeah, you can make beer more easily using IoT.
Cool, thank you. Any thoughts, great arguments or great debates you've had recently?
Yeah, I might struggle to get this out, but it's a kind of like two-sided thing that I want to say, which is, what's next? Because we've been imagining about artificial intelligence, robotics, we've been imagining about this future that is now actually starting to materialise. And not many people have actually imagined beyond the internet, beyond applicants, beyond what's starting to emerge. And the other side of what I want to give, which is sort of might draw on a little bit of interesting discussion, is the chaos that could possibly come from technology going so fast that we run into a future world where we have no control, or we lose control. And I don't know if anyone saw an absolutely amazing documentary just the other night, in which they examined how Donald Trump came to power using Facebook. And I think the Donald Trump team absolutely mastered with Cambridge Analytica. They absolutely mastered their campaign, their digital marketing campaign, and that is evidence, in my view anyway, that is evidence of the great Silicon Valley platform creators suddenly having their tools that they've built being used in a way which they're not happy with. So it's kind of like, what's next? Because we're going at so fast, breakneck speed, it's where are we going to be?
Great, thank you. So it sounds like we've got a question of has IoT gone too far or not far enough? Time for your questions. So pop a hand up and I'll come over. I think we probably won't make each question for every panelist. We'll just pass it around a bit.
Hello everyone, my name is Sham. I have a question for Robert. It's actually 3 questions, so hopefully it won't be too long to answer. Just your company, I forget the name of it. Could you maybe some use cases of which blockchain tech you're using? And the second question is basically, could you actually explain the layers of security that needs to be addressed for IoT? For example, firmware, etc. Just very quickly so I understand. Third, would you say blockchain is coming towards, the fact that there's higher validation fees, that pretty much takes away from end-to-end payments. Also, the scalability factor requires a lot more mining power. and therefore it is becoming centralized because no one over here can actually mine anymore. And also, secondly, thirdly, it's not really quant-proof, a lot of the blockchain. So in terms of like the brute force attack, etc. So all these questions make me worried because people are moving blockchain around, but they don't really use Tangle tech, which is much more advanced in my opinion, for the IoT.
Okay, good luck, Robert.
Okay, yeah. So each one of those answers will be approximately 3 hours in length. So everyone's ready for that. Well, look, I'm going to...
The name of your company you can do.
I can do the name of my company. The name of the company is called Netsnapper. And look, so I'm not going to give any of those answers the justice it deserves because those are very long discussions and very complex topics. But on the blockchain piece, we have looked at how do we integrate with some pieces. We're working with a large integrator. We're looking at how we can integrate some things around some of the IBM, Watson plus blockchain stuff. However, the answer to the question is actually we're not integrating with it because we've kind of filed that as a future-looking thing and defaulted back to a lot of, there's way too many issues today to sort out with some of these real deployments. So to answer that question, we've looked at some of that with some large integrators, we've looked at some of the IBM stuff. There's some really interesting things around it, and I think it does have a role in the future, but we're not really integrating that in any live deployments we're doing today. The second question, again, is...
I almost got the second question.
Oh, come on, it was really good, it was really good.
The third one. Because I'm more interested with Tangle versus blockchain and that's the I know it's going to be like almost like a conjoined solution, but when it comes to IoT itself, Tangle is far more superior because it's truly scalable versus blockchain companies.
Yes. Again, I would sort of also keep that into the future argument. I don't know about many of the deployments today we're looking at. We need this here and now. Which then I think goes to your other question, which was what are all the sort of layers of security, right? Now, I'm not going to get all of these because there's so many, right? And there's companies that are doing, silicon level stuff there, to make sure that, and actually some things that, it's hardware versus software. There's a lot of hardware pieces in there. There's a lot of software pieces in there. There's a lot of integration with, how do you manage certificate and key generation, and where do you store those certificates, and how do you make sure that stuff hasn't been messed with? So there's a lot of stuff going on from the end devices to make sure you don't mess with them. There's a lot of things in the gateway back into the network. This is where we get involved, and we tend to be more on the software, IPsec security, encryption piece. But we work with a lot of gateway guys and silicon guys that are doing some really cool stuff. One partner we work with that does a lot of, quantum cryptology and things like that. We're working with them on a couple of defense projects. So what they do is they use photonics and stuff to do true random number generation so they can do. Right now we do some deployments, we do up to 384-bit encryption. We're talking about 4,000-bit encryption and things in the defense industry. So, I could talk for a long time about everything else, but there's a lot of layers, and this is part of the problem with IoT, right? Is there's everything from hardware, software, from the edge of the network, lots of different devices. How do you manage authentication? It's a real mess. And then the other piece that's a real hassle with the security piece is you have to keep operating systems and software updated because otherwise there's lots of security problems. So now you've got sensors in every weather thing, in every shipper container. How do you actually manage those and update those? So there's a massive problem with some of those pieces as well. So again, not answering your questions in full, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor for some of the things that we get exposed to from day to day.
Great. So on to the next one. Yeah.
My name is Ola, and this is for the guy from Lynch. In the US, we have seen several advances in mobility in the industry of transportation. I know you guys have invested in Lyft in America. Where do you think mobility is going in the UK economy?
Hi, thanks for the question. You would think we'd have a complete answer to this, given that it's basically the only thing that we look at. And I think there are various scenarios that we think are likely. We try to look ahead a few years and thinking about how cars can change the way in which people use their vehicles. We think about the infrastructure around that. And we think about up-and-coming mobility services, and clearly the rise of Uber and Lyft and these types of companies globally has been really interesting. In countries like, so I was in Delhi some 6 to 12 months ago, and we were looking in India at how the fact that Uber has put money into the wages of drivers has meant that people can no longer so easily afford a private driver. And that means people are less likely to own a car themselves. And then we're looking at how those kinds of social changes are changing the way in which people get around. And there's no single answer, because the answer in India and the answer in the UK will be very different, as many other countries. But if we just think about the UK, I think I'm expecting, when we look at some of the mobility services that we're investing in and some of the things that I think are coming, we're expecting in general, on average, a smaller proportion of people will own cars. I've worded it that way because actually the population continues to grow, and it means that maybe there could be about the same number of cars on the road in the short term, but there will be a proportion of people who start to use shared mobility solutions, the ability to borrow my friend's car, the ability to get an Uber or similar type of mode of transport, or even pop-up coach trips. And we have a company we've invested in called Zelo who pop up coach trips, and they're doing very well. So in the short term, it's things like that. But we do look further ahead, and we've been talking to TfL about what does autonomous vehicles mean to London, and what does it take for London to adopt new modes of autonomy. And they have kind of mantra, which I don't mind repeating, which is, if it makes sense to the people of London, and makes transport easier in London, then it's of interest to them. But that has to be the first thing. That they're not interested in supporting businesses because it can make money and change the way people move around. It has to really make a positive impact. So we're looking in the short term at things that can make a positive impact, and longer term we're looking at the significant change that autonomy can bring, like the example I gave, the potential impact of autonomy on how delivery networks work. And really, I don't think we can give a specific answer, but what I can say is it's really exciting to think about it. And what I would urge you to do, if you're interested, is read about what people think will happen in the future and draw your own conclusions, because actually no one really knows. It's just a really exciting time where we think about what these things can mean to the future.
Thanks, that's very timely as well. Our next open event is mid-September on impact investing, the future of impact investing, so keep an eye out for that.
One of the best examples I recently found of an Internet of Things connected device was it was a pill bottle, which would basically tell you your doctor whether you had or hadn't taken medication during the day, and would let your physician know what your adherence to a course of medication was, and also buzz you when you hadn't taken it. It was targeted, I believe, mainly at elderly people. And I thought that was an excellent example of an IoT device in a more domestic setting. I open it to the panel. Can you give examples of other things which you think are excellent examples of IoT in domestic settings?
I kind of agree with you, and I think that there are enormous opportunities in the healthcare sector, because there is this tremendous scope for innovation. I can't pin down a device which I think is an exemplar of an excellent IoT device, but I really agree with that as an example where IoT can improve the quality of our lives. So good example from you.
Cool. Further examples, domestic, was that right?
Yes.
That's domestic examples.
I had the good fortune to attend a kickoff for a hackathon on helping people to sleep who are receiving cancer treatment. It turns out when you're receiving cancer treatment, it's actually really hard to sleep. And there were a few products that already exist that I thought were worth mentioning now. And there was was a device that there was a pillow that would help you sleep by emitting a kind of white noise, and there was something else that it did. You know, I thought I had a great answer to this, and it's all slipping away. There was a pillow. There was a bedside light that would adjust, so you would, it would wake you up in a very gentle way and help you to go to sleep by giving the right wavelengths of light when you're going to sleep. And I think there was something on like a bedding that was really smart bedding that managed your temperature while you're trying to sleep. And I think these things are really interesting, like Internet of Things devices. And then the other thing that we discussed was the Netflix socks, which amazes me that people haven't heard of these, but there are socks you can buy that if you fall asleep whilst watching Netflix, it pauses Netflix for you. It resolves the issue of if I'm watching a series, I get 3 episodes beyond what I'm watching, I've got no idea where to rewind back to. Now, I don't believe that people haven't heard of these, but I think that's probably the most useful item that I can think of in Internet of Things. So yeah, and there's loads more out there, but have a look, see what you can find.
I can't beat Netflix socks, really. I mean, the cat flap was alright, but Netflix socks is the top one, so I don't think I can top that.
Okay, I think we're there for a final roundup. At this point, I think it's fair just to ask, I'm maybe a bit sceptical. I tend to think we walk away from these events and I don't remember a great deal myself. I'm a little bit ADHD. So it's nice to give the panelists a chance just to say, if there is one thing that the audience remembers, what would you like it to be? So perhaps let's just have a really short soundbite from each of the panelists to finish with on just one thing that you want to be remembered, the statement that you have on IoT for the audience tonight.
So it's here, IoT. Actually, I'm not sure whether Hexology crosses the IoT bridge. I think of Hexology as a mixture of augmented reality and IoT. And so if I had to give you guys one thing to take away, and that is Hexology is the platform that you can use to augment the world around you.
Cool. Thank you. Michelle?
I'd probably go with something around value. So really getting to grips up front with, if you're a supplier of an IoT solution, really what sort of value you think somebody's going to get out of it, and making sure that you have that value reflected in the cost, etc. Yeah, I mean, mostly I'm on the industrial side, so I would say again, seriously weighing up what you need to do up front, planning. So the successful IoT projects are all about planning and assessment of the market and its value.
Yeah, just to, I guess, build on what was already said. I mean, the IoT is here and it is now. I think we've all seen a few examples of things in the home. The home's kind of interesting, and I am going to go and Google Netflix socks later and see if I can find those. I do think the real examples are in industry, and there's a lot more happening now than I don't know why, and probably because it's industry, it's not as sexy as a lot of things that are out there. It doesn't get as much press as a lot of things, but there's a lot of interesting examples you can find if you're interested in learning more. And I also think the other thing, security is central to both consumer and industrial, and we're only on the brink of discovering what it means to be secure in an IoT network, what it means to scale a secure IoT network. So there's a lot of issues there. And we're also, I think, heading into this time where there's a very interesting clash between consumer and industrial IoT. I think it used to be that enterprise and industrial security issues were completely separate from consumer ones. But like I said, right now we're finding a lot of very interesting things where millions of devices in consumer homes are being turned into malicious botnets and then used to attack large enterprise or attack industry. We're also seeing a lot more state-sponsored cyber attacks and cybersecurity issues. The ones that we see on the news, I can guarantee you are very, very, very small proportion of the ones that happen. So we live in interesting times.
Cool. Maybe you can cheer us up, Alex.
I'll try. I'll just link this back to where I finished with my talk. I'll try and get the sentence right. Ownership isn't a law of nature. It's an artifact of distribution. What I mean by that is we own things because we can't easily move things on demand to where we need them. So the question for Internet of Things is, what are the key things that Internet of Things can do for us that enable us to get what we want when we want it? And then when we work that out, we should build it.
All right. Cool. Well, folks, that brings us to the end.